Well, thank you. And maybe before we start off, if I can just give a thanks to B&H for allowing me this opportunity, and also to Olympus, who is sponsoring me to be here today. So two great organizations, so I thank you for that. Let's jump into this. The title of this is Raw Travel, and somebody had asked the question about India. This happens to be in India, a friend I made during the Kumbh Mela, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go into the program. But what I wanted to do today was just give you a little capsule on what my intent was for today, tell you a little bit about who I am, what I shoot, some key elements, and what I look for. So during the course of the imagery that I'm going to share with you, I'll point out some things that were important to me in deciding to take the photograph and any other nuances that would be helpful. And then we'll jump into the travel. I broke this into two parts in the travel. One is in the domestic and then one in the international and the philanthropic arena, and I'll chat with you a little bit about that as we move on. So, a little bit about me. And as you may have gathered from the conversations we had before we started, photography is a passion of mine. I have been photographing at a very early age. My grandfather, who worked for what was then called the New York Agency as a photographer here in the city, was an inspiration to me. He always had a camera in his hand, and as a young child, I followed him everywhere. And at some point, he gave me a replica mini 35 millimeter, and so as he was shooting, I would be shooting along with him. The only difference was mine didn't have any film in it. When you see the imagery here, you're not going to see studio work. That is not my forte. I am an outdoor enthusiast, so we're talking about travel, and obviously that's a big part of it. And where I made a transition in my life was in 2003 when somebody handed me a digital camera, and I remember my words very clearly that I would try it, but I would never leave the film arena. Well, talk about eating your words. Obviously, I definitely did. I've been an Olympus product user since about that time frame, and was invited into the Visionary program a couple years ago, and it's been a wonderful experience for me. So here I am at my first photo shoot, and we're going to do a little math here. I'm 2 years older than my brother, so I can say definitely what age I started photography. So the answer is 3. So that's when I started playing with getting into the photography world. That's the camera that I mentioned that my grandfather gave to me. And anyway, I'm glad that he happened to have that shot of me with my first photo shoot, if you will. I'm a strong believer in mentors. Here's a picture of me when I first got out of the pen. I mention this because both as a child and as an adult, I do believe it's important to have a mentor. And for me, as I mentioned, my grandfather, that's him on the right, and that's obviously me on the left there. This is in Brooklyn. I grew up, if you're familiar with the D train between Avenue U and Neck Road, that's the area where I was brought up. And this is probably heading down towards Sheepshead Bay at one of the holidays, if you will. Anyway, a little bit more about me. I mentioned early on about doing a lot of philanthropic work, and outdoor photographer a little over a year ago found out about that and wanted to do a little more of a story, so they did a 3-page spread in the, I think it's December 2013 issue. So if you have the opportunity, check it out. That'll tell you a little bit more about that. Shortly thereafter that, if you're familiar with TED Talks, they asked me to talk a little bit more about that, and the title of my talk was Vocation versus Avocation, so you can check that out, and if you want to learn a little bit more about some of those aspects of it, feel free to do so. I mentioned I'm part of the Visionary program. There's a dozen of us across the country, and it's a real nice opportunity in that I get to travel to many places, give presentations, do workshops all around the country, and one of my favorite places, of course, being here in New York City. I share this with you because this is my office, and there's a reason why that's significant. There's obviously associated challenges with the office environment that I go to on a very frequent basis. So my equipment and so forth are very important to me, and many other factors associated with the travel component. So I'll share with you a little bit about my equipment, and here is what I typically take when I go out on a photo shoot. I hear some giggling. Of course, that is not the case, and I'm exaggerating a point. Portability is an extremely important aspect of what I do when I'm photographing and when I'm traveling. This is a list of my primary equipment, and Brian and Jim have a lot of samples up here on the table that after we go through the presentation, they have suggested, please come up, check it out. This is what I use. This is what I take on my photography adventures. And the OMD M1 that you see circled there, that's my primary workhorse of the cameras that are here. What's in my bag? I can carry 11 lenses with me when I go out on a photo shoot in a relatively small bag. And again, for the places that I go to, and you'll appreciate this more as we get into it, this is extremely important for me. So what do I shoot? Here are I break it down into these primary categories. I'm going to show you a sampling of imagery that I take in each one of those categories, and then we'll jump into the travel component of it. But I want to share with you some of it. I mentioned early on, though, the focus that I have is in the philanthropic photojournalism world. I do work for a lot of nonprofits on an international basis, and I have imagery I'll share with you on that. And of course, travel, because when I'm over there and I'm out and about, I'm obviously taking advantage of that opportunity. So let's look at a few flora fauna. This is an image that is a little macro shot. It was raining, ugly day. Stuck that little waterproof TG3 at the time in my pocket, and I was able to get some amazing shots. This is the new TG4 that they have out, and the macro capabilities are absolutely amazing. I love the flora fauna world. If I'm having a stressed out day or whatever, I take the camera out there and I start doing this stuff. I forget about everything else in the world that's going on. So it's great therapy for me. This is, I purposely wanted to shoot it this way to get a compression so you can get a sense of what's behind it, but have the image compressed as you look at it. And this is really not too far from my home. Obviously wanted your eye to go to the blooms and less to the old stone house there. And if anybody's heard of the Kutztown Folk Festival, I was there with my granddaughter, and they had all these little chicks, and I thought, you know what, let's try and compress that in there and just get a picture of their eyes. And then I saw Mickey out in the desert when I was in Arizona, and I just thought, well, now that's pretty bizarre, and just happened to come across that, and of course, immediately what I thought of. And another shot from that very same trip. And things like macros with butterflies and so forth are always fun. This is actually in Disney, and I was down there in February, and just what was fun is the detail that you can't see it on the screen, but it is there. And again, these are things I always like to photograph, the not necessarily obvious part of it. So let's move on to landscape, which is another big part of what I like to shoot. And I share this image because 90% of the people that shoot from this bridge, over my shoulder is the Bethlehem steel plant. That's what everybody looks at. And in a lot of my workshops, what I advocate is look at things that may not be obvious. And it was just a matter of turning around and seeing this incredible sunset. That was the shot and not what everybody else was looking at. And I love getting up early when the opportunity is present for sunrises. And you can see here there's this beautiful fog and mist that was on the lake. It lasted 60 to 90 seconds, and then it burned off. And the other part of it is we've always heard that when you shoot a portrait is right after a landscape mode, and that's what this next one is. But what I really try to do is, if you got a very good reflection, is when your audience can't necessarily tell which is the right position that should be in, and that obviously is the right position. Zion National Park. We talked about some of the national parks earlier. This, of course, is in Epcot. And where the opportunity presents itself, I love reflections. I'm always looking for reflections when I'm shooting. So we talked about some of the national parks early on. This is the Monument Valley, and this is the Double Arch for obvious reasons. And I had it in my head that I wanted to shoot this. I wanted to get the stars, and that was a real important part. We went there. This is probably about midnight, me and another fellow that were shooting. But I actually had one more step to this that I wanted to work real hard to capture, and that's star trails. So without moving the camera, if you look at this next image, here it is with the star trails. That's about a 45-minute exposure, and Olympus has a thing called live composite that's built into their cameras. That's one image that I was able to capture this with, and the technology is just amazing. Very happy with the results. And here's another image of what's a delicate arch, and this of course is the image that you see on the license plates there. But again, my intention was different, and if you'll notice that the tripod stayed in the same location. If you look at what I did then, this also is about a 45-minute exposure. Happy to note that this is, Olympus is actually using this in their ad campaign now for their live composite mode. So anyway, very happy with how that turned out. And here it is using live composite during the day, the effects that you can get clouds that look like they're a painterly effect. And it's not Photoshop or anything like that, it's just simply the clouds moving. I put a neutral density filter on it so I could slow it down, and that was the result. And this is fun, I like to chat about this. This is a 64 megapixel image that I shot with the new OND EM5 Mark II. And it does require a tripod, but the debate has been with Micro Four Thirds. There's small sensor, small files, 64 megapixel on this thing here. You can read the penny that's in that pond that was dropped in there. It's pretty amazing. And I share this. This is on the High Line. Going to be doing a workshop with the Photo Plus that's coming up in a few weeks, and had to do a little reconnaissance work, and I saw this image as I was walking by. I thought, well, that'll be fun to share. And this is in right south of Myrtle Beach, these beautiful old trees with greenery all around it. So let me take it to abstract. Anybody know what this is? This is, I spent thousands of dollars, went hundreds of miles to get this shot, and I'm being very sarcastic. It's an oil slick in the 7-Eleven parking lot. So the point of that is you obviously don't need to go far. You don't need to spend a lot of money to get some, what I think are some very fun shots. There's some macros on the inside of a watch. This is looking into a glass kiln. I love photographing glass, all different types and shapes. This happens to be a broken piece in an old factory. This is a piece of glasswork done by an artist by the name of Steve Tobin, and had it backlit, and in what I see there are the four elements, and anyway, my eyes can wander quite a bit when I'm shooting it. So these are some of the things that I like to do in the abstract. And if you're familiar with Chihuly, had an opportunity to do a workshop out in Seattle this past fall, an amazing place to see. And being from New York, you should all be familiar with the Javits Center, and that was just fun shot of the wall. And this is in my backyard. I live in Pennsylvania, right near the old Bethlehem Steel plant. I've had the opportunity to get into the facility. This is my map of the United States, but all this oxidation that's taking place in the facility, I have no idea what's causing the discoloration to that extent. It's amazing. I probably don't want to know what's causing it, but from a photographic standpoint, it makes for some really wonderful colors. And this is right outside, this is in Philadelphia, the 30th Street train station. This is looking into the Schuylkill River, photographing the reflections. And if you've been to Seattle, you may be familiar with the EMP building. Fun place to photograph. I was there for probably 8 hours. In that 8-hour time, the light changed many times and the imagery continued to change. Just a fun place to photograph. And being as I live in Pennsylvania, I have some opportunities with urban decay and some architecture that, is these old buildings, and this is something that's really fun. I enjoy. The only caution is that when I shot this, shortly after I took the shot, a manhole lid slid open and two guys came out of the manhole, and I thought this is probably a good time for me to exit it, which I did then. This is Penhurst in Pennsylvania. It's a former state hospital, and this obviously is the morgue, and my intent here was to capture the image where your eye might go up these steps and lead you to something that you just don't know what's behind there, but create a little curiosity in the process. Also at the same facility, you can just see the water from all the roof that's been in there and the reflection. Excuse me, this is Lannaconing in western Maryland. This is an old silk mill that was shut down. Amazing place to photograph. It's almost like the people just punched out and didn't touch anything. There's still coffee cups on tables and things. Beautiful facility. This is in Easton, Pennsylvania, called the State Theater. I do a workshop there called Behind the Curtain, and amazing place to see, because we go to these theaters many times and our eye obviously goes to the performance and we miss what I think is some of the most beautiful parts of it. And do a 180 degree, and if you can picture that little seating area right there, this next shot is just 180 from there, looking into the other direction. And this is Eastern State Penitentiary. You may have heard of this in Philadelphia. Beautiful facility of the old prison cells here. Photographically, you could spend days here and not nearly cover everything that's there. And this is a picture where I can't show you the exterior. This is a temple in Gujarat, India, and it's a temple that's inverted. And what I mean by that, you can't even see it from the ground. The temple is built in the typical pyramid fashion, but in the opposite direction of what we typically know. And this was just a recent discovery. I say recent, in the last 10, 15 years. An amazing facility. I did a series up in the coal region. These are the old coal breakers. Many of these do not exist anymore. They've torn most of them down. And this is an image in downtown Allentown that PBS asked me to take, as they do a lot of interviews with the politicians on CNBC, and they use this as their backdrop. Of course, a daytime image and then an evening image. And I want to just pause a little bit, since I mentioned earlier I'm from Pennsylvania. I live right near the old Bethlehem steel plant. This was taken about, I'm going to guess 2 months, 3 months after the facility shut down. A wonderful photographic opportunity. People ask me what's the largest enlargement I've ever made. And I can say with fact that it's 11 foot by 20 foot that the local AAA team used to put it in their executive suite area. So I'm very proud of that I have an image that's 11 foot by 20 foot. And these are just some of the imagery from the steel, again, trying to have it maybe emulate a little bit like the likes of Walker Evans and so forth, and some of the work that he had done in this area here. And again, this is a workshop we did within the complex. And today, it's a thriving, converted music venue now. They had just finished a music fest, which it's 1.1 million people that'll come through this in a week's period of time. It's an amazing facility to see. I was allowed to get up on some of the roofs to photograph it, so if you're ever in that part of the world, stop in and check it out. It's really quite amazing. And the other thing I like to photograph is people. Well, this one I should probably say people and dogs. And we talked earlier about Bethlehem Steel, not Bethlehem Steel, excuse me, Grand Central, and that's where that image was taken. And I like to get out to maybe some of the reenactments and so forth, and these guys look like they literally just were from that era and just screamed to have their image taken. And here's Abe giving the address and with the flag behind it. And that gentleman probably wasn't as happy as the others for me to photograph him, but nonetheless, I was able to get his picture. This is a workshop in Phoenix this past fall. This young lady was kind enough to pose. We found these beautiful flowers all around. And here's a conductor in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. That is not Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. That would be on the western part of India. And this here is in Gujarat, India. And 3 guesses where that is. That'd be New Orleans. So anyway, in this last image here from the people's side, this is the salt flats leading into Pakistan. The only thing between where I'm standing and Pakistan is probably about 100 miles of that same condition. And this guy happened to be coming by, and the light was perfect. And I got what I thought was a fun image with that. This is the closeout of the Allentown Fair. She was quite happy. So my backyard. I show these because you don't have to travel far, albeit there's fun places to travel far. In this place here, if you'll note that little window up there, I want you to just keep eye on that. When I'm not traveling, if I'm here on the weekend, that's where I generally am, taking my dog for a walk. This next picture is looking out that same window. A couple years ago, you may remember when we had that snowfall in October, so it's one of the few pictures I have where I have leaves and snow in the same picture. And again, this is all from It's called the Lehigh Parkway, that area. So I've always got my camera with me, always looking for opportunities to photograph when I'm down in an area. I'm not far from the Amish country, so periodically you get an opportunity to go up there and photograph. This is the Mercer Tile Works in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Next shot is an interior. This was about 5 images because the dynamic range was so extreme, very, very dark on the inside and extremely bright on the exterior. And there's a fundraiser that was going on down there, and I had to gather these guys up for that shot. I like going to like some of the air shows, but I like going when people don't necessarily like to go in the off time when the clouds and it looks like the rains are going to come down. For me, that's where I get some of my best imagery. This is right outside of Philadelphia, the only cemetery on the National Historic Record. A beautiful place to see. And not too far from there is a place called Graffiti Alley, where if you're going to go, do not go by yourself, but amazing art all throughout this area. And this is literally my backyard. This is a glass top picnic table, and it had rained and the sun just popped out and created these wonderful colors, and so that one is as close as it gets. There's a place in Macungie, Pennsylvania, the largest antique car show east of the Mississippi. It's called Das Fest, and I don't know a lot about cars, but I love to photograph these old cars. Just beautiful, and wide angle screams at you for a lot of these cars with the big fins on the back. Just some really fun imagery with that. And Jim Thorpe, of course, at fall. And as we were coming back, this steam engine came, and it's one of those things where I don't know if there's a steam button in a steam engine, but he hit that right at the right time, because what you can't tell is there's people all around here on either side, but because of the blowing the steam, it gives the illusion of this train being totally by itself. There's a workshop in Quakertown. We had some models work with the old trains there. And this is, I don't do selfies very often, but this is me. This is with that live composite I was telling you about. In that Bethlehem Steel facility, we were spinning some steel wool, and obviously that's pretty popular these days. This is in the historic district of Bethlehem, doing some light painting here. And this, I want to pause just for a minute and talk a little bit about this. This is on Spring Garden Street in Philadelphia, and this is what is called the blue hour, so there's still light in the sky, but yet all the buildings are lit. Colors were unbelievable. But the point I wanted to make on this thing here is by moving what was probably no more than 30 feet to the right, I'm able to, and about 10 minutes later, I'm able to capture a totally different image. This is the Schuylkill Expressway. So I could tell you that this was taken in a totally different part of the world, and you wouldn't know. There's 30 feet of differential from this shot to this shot. So again, it's one of those things where don't necessarily assume you've got the shot and you're done and you're ready to walk away. Look around you. And then moving back to where I was after the sun completely settled, I took this shot and again used the live composite because I'm able to keep the lens open for a long period of time. And you'll notice these swirls here, and there's several hospitals over here, and what that is the helicopters circling, waiting to land or take off. So all within 30 feet of each other, even though all three of those images appear to be completely different. So let me share my favorite subject with you, and then we'll jump into the travel stuff. And with due respect, I have to show you my granddaughter. She's been seen all over the world. She has no clue. This was a little over a year ago. This is my favorite subject. And as I mentioned, we were down in Disney this past February, and here's a more current picture of her getting her paintings done at Disney. So I have to show my granddaughter when I give these presentations. So let me share a couple key elements. Excuse me. I break it down, successful photography, to these two ingredients: the composition and design and post-processing. And yes, I post-process. So if there are purists here in the room, you can leave now and I won't be offended. But every single image that you have seen and that you will see has been post-processed to some extent. And I'm an advocate of that because I want your eye to see it the way my eyes do, and in many respects, it needs a little help to do that. And if I miss a cigarette butt, with due respect, the cigarette butt's coming out of the picture. So if you're a purist and you don't like that, that's, I apologize in advance. So anyway, with respect to the key elements, as I mentioned, composition, design, when a couple years ago, I wrote down what goes through my head anytime I go out on a shoot. And these are the things that are in my head. I do this all subconsciously now. I don't go through my checklist, but the first thing out of the gate, I have a plan. But I immediately allow myself to break that plan. I have it preconceived and non, is many times the image is not what I'm looking at, but over my shoulder, as I shared with you in that earlier image. Always sensitive to the environment, and the key thing on the environment, a very key thing, of course, is light. I'm always sensitive to the type of light, the kind of light, and how we can use that to make it beneficial. And then a couple other things that are important here, again, principles of geometry, framing, focus and sharpness, juxtaposition. I'm always trying to be sensitive to that. Scanning the subject, I like to try to pause when I can, look at it, make sure that there isn't something in there that shouldn't be, or vice versa. And then one of the things that I've learned that I'm terrible at is patience. If there's movement in the image, I am terrible at patience, but I've come to learn to work that, because many times by being patient, I've had much more successful results by letting that occur. Another thing I look for all the time when I'm shooting, even if it's a portrait, is layers. I'm always cognizant of layers and how I can make that be a part of the imagery. And then the other things there, we'll talk a little bit about HDRs, panoramas. We talked about macro. Depth of field, I'm always sensitive to that. I'm always careful when I'm shooting. Do I want more depth? Do I want less depth? Always trying to be smart to that extent. And then if there is movement in the image, as I said earlier, is that decisive moment when the right time is to catch it. I could spend a whole class just talking about that part of it, but we won't do that. Here's my toolbox with respect to post-processing. And in this just happens to be, thank you, what I use, and I've used more than this periodically or less than that, but my primary go-tos are Lightroom. I do 75% of my editing in Lightroom. The remainder of that is done in Photoshop with some of these potential plugins. But Lightroom now, with the advancements and the enhancements that they've made with that, is my go-to post-processing software. So here's a couple examples. Look good, changed a little bit, just tweaked a little bit. You decide which one you like better, but for my eye, that's what I liked. In this next image here, I loved the composition, I was happy with it, but there's little dandruff or something on the flowers, so with your permission, I took that out, add a little more texture to the image, and again, you decide which image you like better, but for me, that's what I like. The other thing is, I mentioned about HDR. I use this periodically, and I'm very careful because I don't want my images, I don't want people to look at it and say, oh, that's an HDR shot. My joy is when I show people the image, they say, oh, I like that. I just don't like when people do HDR, not realizing it's HDR. And the simple fundamentals are an overexposure, underexposure, middle exposure, and again, this is a subject matter where we could spend an entire class just talking about that, but I use it as a tool, but I try to use it where it's not obvious to the viewer as to what happens. So here it is. In its finished form, I'm able to capture the dynamic range of the shadows and the highlights and so forth, and so I'm pretty happy with it. The only thing is, in looking at this image, I can tell you that the roof did not slope like that. So with your permission, I took it one step further. I said the perspective is wrong on that, and the other thing that bothered me a little bit is, I can't do anything about it, is that little monument there. So with an extra step or two, there's my image now. And so whether you like that or not, that's my process. That's what I do. That's how my eye saw it, with the exception of the monument. And that's a process that I will go through to my images. Here's that same building. This is in Clinton, New Jersey, called the Red Mill. And the reason I point this out, this has been photographed millions of times. To the best of my knowledge, I'm the only one who has this shot. And the reason being is, and I don't know if we have one here, they make a camera called a TG860, is that right, guys? TG860 or something like that. The camera is actually 50% in the water. I'm able to flip the screen up and get a shot of that. And so to the best of my knowledge, I'm the only one who has that shot. Right after I took that, the guy I was with said, Frank, there's 3 or 4 water snakes right behind you. You may want to think about getting out. So made that exit quick. All right, so let's talk about travel. That's what we're here to talk about. I'm going to chat with you about domestic travel, and then we'll talk about some of the international stuff. And places that we've all seen, this is the being in Chicago. What I look for when I'm photographing an image is look for dynamic components of it. Of course, the sky is what made this. I was fortunate to be there when the sky was right. But you'll notice again, as I said earlier, I've got a foreground, I've got midground, and I've got background. I'm always cognizant of that as I'm, teeing up my shot. Here's an example where I saw the moon first, and then I saw this device, and I thought, well, if I can get it to align with this building here, and then put this lamp post into the center of this building, still keep the moon in proper perspective, and catch the shadow of the light post at the same time, then I succeeded. That was not walk up to the thing, take the picture, and walk away. That probably took me about 15, 20 minutes to finally put the composition together correctly before I got it to a point where I was happy with it. And this is very abstract, and most people look at it first and say, what is it? I've actually sold this picture a couple times, and what it is simply a portion of this reflection right over here. So again, don't necessarily look at just the obvious. Take a step back and look at components and pieces of it, and it's amazing the types of imagery that you can get from it. This is also in Chicago. This is the amphitheater. I simply darkened the sky just to give that nice effect of this metal that was there. Now I share this. This is Horseshoe Bend, and I've been photographed probably a gazillion times. I did this 5 years ago, and I was there 5 months ago. So here's just a slightly difference with some new technology and a little different time frame. But people ask, how do you get those shots? And they give you an idea what goes into it. So it's not necessarily just hit the shutter. So just to give you a little taste of that. Mentioned about the layers. Again, I love wide angle. I'm a big proponent of wide angle shooting. I wanted this piece in the foreground. Again, we talked about those layers, so I've got my foreground, midground, and of course background. And for me, that works well in that regard. And Bryce, again, this happened to be at sunrise. And this is in the slot canyons. Again, been photographed many, many times. And I want to point out that this again was 5 years ago, and the image is vertical, and the reason the image is vertical is because I had extreme dynamic range issues back at the time, and I didn't have time to capture really the time frames I needed for the exposures. People were coming in and out, and I was begging people to hold off just a little bit. So fast forward, here's another one from that same time frame. Love the texture, love the patterns. Hopefully it leads you into the back here, but this is a bit of where I struggled. Fast forward to 5 months ago. With new technology and new abilities, I'm able to capture what I wanted to do the first time. And here they are now, without the sky being blown out, still being able to see all the dynamic range, the beautiful textures, the beautiful colors that are in this place. It is just absolutely amazing. Now, the only thing I would have made a little better if I could have got a little cloud or something up there, but you know what, I'm not going to argue. So I'm pretty happy with how they turned out. So the other thing is, stretching a little bit, we thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could get in there at night? We made arrangements with the chief of the Navajo Nation that's there, and at midnight, we were able to get into this place, and I was able to shoot some star trails inside the slot canyons. I've never seen any images within the slot canyons at night, and it was a powerful experience to be in this place. There were 3 people. And normally there's lots of people in there. To be in there just with the 3 of us, it was an amazing, amazing experience. Again, also within the slot canyon. This is not too far from there. This is a Dead Horse Park, and this is called False Kiva. Ask any ranger about this location, they will deny its existence. And for obvious reasons, it's very dangerous to get there, and they want to keep it protected. And again, my objective was to photograph the stars, and as you can see, we did that. Put a little LED light in here so you have a little bit of depth to the image, but you can clearly see the horizon lines and so forth out here. But what I was really after, again, was the star trails. So hiking out of this place at 2 o'clock in the morning is something I do not advocate, and I know why they don't suggest it either, because it was dangerous. But again, I'm pretty happy with the results that we got from this. Anybody know what this is? This is not far from here. It's on the Hudson. This is called Bannerman's Island. This is an old arsenal, and I like to use this example. It's one of the most gorgeous places I've seen. The architecture is second to none, and to think that this was an arsenal and why they put that much aesthetics into it, I don't know. But it was a rainy day. We had to leave like 5 o'clock in the morning in order to get to this boat, because you can only gain access to this facility by boat, because there is literally on purpose, things around the perimeter so the public can't get in there for obvious reason. It was an arsenal. And it was one of those like, well, do I just sleep in? And it's like, no, go. And I mentioned it was rainy during the day, and as we were departing, the sun came out, put this beautiful orange cast on this building, and just made for what I thought was a beautiful photograph. But that's not the key to the story. The key to the story is approximately 2/3 of this no longer exist. It collapsed, and because it was such an old structure. So when the opportunity presents itself, don't be tempted to take that sleep in and say, I'll do it next time, because the next time may never occur. So that building will obviously never look the way it does from these images. The fact that, like I said, 2/3 of that structure no longer exists today. And this was just a few years ago. Of course, one of my favorite places to shoot is the Big Apple. This is taken from the Jersey side. I share this a little sarcastically. This is Radio City. Went with a group of friends. They all had their DSLRs. They had to check them. You're not allowed to take cameras in there. At the time, I was shooting the Olympus pen, a little pen that I put in my pocket. The guy said, what's in your pocket? I showed him, and he looked at it and said, well, okay. Long story short, I got a whole series of wonderful images from Radio City. Out of our group, I'm the only guy who got the shot, so that's kind of fun in that regard. And then afterwards, of course, the people out on the street, these women are promoting Chicago, the story. I saw them, I engaged them, I asked them if I could photograph them, I was moving them around a little bit. All the time while I'm seeing these guys, I see the naked cowboy in the background. And I'm thinking, how can I get that incorporated into it? And I was able to catch it so you can see her finger frames the outline of the naked cowboy. I couldn't have posed that again if I had to. I worked hard to get it, but with a little bit of perseverance, I was able to capture that. And that was my intention when I saw these two guys along with the naked cowboy in the background. And then this one, coincidence, I don't know, but I'm looking at this image. I see these people walk up. They were there for maybe 2 minutes. So again, it's one of those things, don't let the opportunity slip by. But if you look up there, and then I look over here, coincidence? I don't know. Anyway, I got the shot, and the rest is history. This is a 10-stitch panel on one of those rare days where you have just an amazing view of the city, and that doesn't happen very often. So we moved to Vegas. Some shots from here. I have an opportunity to get out there periodically for meetings and so forth, and every time I'm there, I just make sure I spend a couple days just shooting in and around. And I like shooting in the casinos, and I share this image with you because, when they say, wait, there's more. I like to work an image, and I looked at this, and I was finding all of this interesting, except there's a little bit of confusion. Then I looked up at the top, and I saw this structure here, and let's go up one more floor and just work on that. And I love the patterns that were alongside of it, and I thought, wow. Then I looked a little bit closer, and I saw the center of that. It's like, let's take that just one step further. So the point of it is, don't necessarily assume the obvious that you got it and you move on. If there's an opportunity to work the image, try to do that. I was in Seattle this past fall for a workshop there, and I played this little trick with myself because everywhere I looked, I saw the Space Needle, and I thought, you know what, let's just, for kicks, make a little fun thing for yourself and photograph with the intention of having that Space Needle in every one of the photographs. So what I did is I just found myself going through different parts of Seattle, constantly keeping the Space Needle in the picture, and again, all different locations. And it's amazing if you allow yourself some of those games, if you will, the kind of fun results that you can end up with. And this is in the Chihuly Garden outside with a reflection of the ball. And then I thought, well, you know what? There's more than one ball here, and if you look closely, that Space Needle's in 5 reflections in that shot. So anyway, just some fun stuff. And this is also in that, and again, the fun part here is that little sparkle got right at the very top of this glass. And this is inside the Chihuly Museum, and they don't mind you photographing, and just, if you have the chance, it's just phenomenal. So moving to our nation's capital, again, I photograph, of course, the obvious, but I also like to photograph the not so obvious, and get me in a train station or a subway station. You're not allowed to take a tripod in there, but if you're quick and you have one of these little 6-inch tripods that I actually picked up here at B&H, put it on the floor, had it on the camera, got the shot before any of the police came in, I was able to capture it. But wait, there's more. So as this train is pulling out, here's the shot. And if you look, you'll see, this gentleman over here looking through the window and just some of the textures on the floor, and of course the streaks from the train departing. So again, mentioned about that obvious versus the unobvious. And this, of course, is the station itself. This is back at Laniconian. I mentioned that silk mill. And again, I'm always looking for textures, shadows, things like that when I'm photographing. And you'll notice some of the images I do in black and white, some of them I do in color, depending upon how I feel about it. This is one of the machines that are in that facility. And you probably have heard of Old Car City, right out about an hour north of Atlanta. Amazing place to photograph. I worked to try to keep the steering wheel in the crux of that broken glass, so that became a focal point. And there's just all these neat little artifacts all around the whole complex. Environmental problem, it looks like there could be a bit of an issue there, but not as bad as the next park job that you see here. Now, anybody know what this is? Biltmore, that's exactly right. Had an opportunity to photograph that, and there's challenges with this. And one of the challenges is when we were dropped off right out front here, and you can't see it, but there's a small little wired fence that does not allow you to get onto the grass area. And I wanted to get a close-up wide angle, but this was as close as I could get. And so my option is to just take a series of images up close and then create a panel of that, so I was able to get an up-close image of that. But I didn't know those people who were in the picture, and so with your permission, I made them disappear, and I ended up with the image that I was happy with. So again, that was one of the ways to overcome that particular problem. And we all know Grand Central, and this to me is one of my favorite places to photograph. I had the opportunity this year to oversee a couple workshops in Grand Central, and where I am taking this picture is the highest portion of Grand Central that a human being can go to. And as you know, that's a mirror reflection on both sides, and where I am is this very top panel up here on the opposite side. You have to lay on your belly because there's only about 18 inches of visible glass in order to get the image. But what an experience to see Grand Central from this perspective. And here it is with a fisheye, just a fun opportunity to shoot. And again, I love the geometry and so forth, and I love shooting straight up where the opportunity presents itself. If there's other things, characteristics of the building, of course, in Grand Central there are. And you can get permits for tripods, which we needed for this, and which just made for some wonderful imagery. Again, fisheye was a real plus for this. And on this image, I wanted to show the hustle bustle, a little bit of the grittiness. I desaturated a little bit, slowed the shutter speed down, and again, just so you can get the sense and the feel of the busyness of Grand Central. And this is, and we're told we weren't allowed to put this on Facebook or anything like that. This is FDR's train that is parked underneath just before you get to Grand Central. And what an amazing thing to see. And again, beyond that, it's just amazing to think that that thing's parked underneath here. So let's talk about travel in the international realm and in the philanthropic area. I mentioned early on that I do work for some international nonprofit organizations. This happens to be an organization called Worthwhile Wear, and it has to do with the reconciliation efforts in Africa. And they invited me to come over to get some marketing material for the organization. And they said, we can time this if you're interested, because in Sudan, the South is going to be seceding from the North. And if you'd like, we can arrange to have you here at that time. I'm thinking, witness the birth of a nation? Let me think about that for a nanosecond. And I was very fortunate to be able to be there during the time frame in which that South cessation took place. Anyway, these are just some of the imagery of the people in this area. Happened to be Uganda. This is a woman, and what makes the image, for me anyway, is the young fella coming down. And you'll notice there's almost like an S pattern to this, and the human eye likes that. But again, I wanted to emphasize the fact that this woman who works for probably what is about $1 a day, I think they said, doing nothing but breaking rocks, no eyewear, no helmets, no protective devices, that's just how it is. I mentioned earlier about looking for textures a lot of times and just screamed to photograph it, and this young lady was, looking out this window. And here's one that I just think this is one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen. And no Photoshop here, this is as it was. She's wearing this beautiful green plastic bag on her head, just a beautiful image anyway, and the light was just perfect when I had the opportunity to shoot it. Boys will be boys no matter what part of the world you go into, and just some happy faces. And if that doesn't put a smile on your face, you need to check your heart rate. Just a cute young lady. And what got my attention here is the intensity on the look of this woman's face. And yet I tried to be careful to try to get as many of the eyes still peering through in the background in this shot. And again, fortunately, the light was hitting her. She turned her head just right at the right moment, and I was able to capture that. So, the day of the cessation, they said, dress like a photographer, and we want to make arrangements to get you in there. I was like, what do you mean dress like a photographer? What does that mean? I am a photographer. Anyway, the long and short of it is, I was very, very fortunate because the day that this took place, they allowed 2 photographers in there, and they kept going, no, he's an American photojournalist, you let him go. And for whatever reason, they allowed me to stay in the middle of the parade ground during what was probably an 8 to 10 hour ceremony of the cessation process. And it was an experience I'll never forget, and I'm very, very blessed to have had the opportunity to have photographed that. They allowed me carte blanche access, all the military personnel, all the governors, all the commissioners, everybody that was there, they allowed me to photograph it. And they had these parades that went through the parade ground for like 5 hours, different tribes from all over that part of Africa, and it was just an amazing opportunity to see it. I am literally right behind the generals and so forth as the armies are marching by, allowed to photograph this. It was just an incredible experience. So let me take you to Mumbai, and this is with an organization that is, I mentioned the other one was Worthwhile, excuse me, the other one was Alarm. This one is Worthwhile Aware. This is an organization that deals with a very difficult and tough issue, and it's the sex trade that goes on in our world, and there's a real problem in this part of India, and I went there on their behalf to photograph for them. The images that I provided for them you will not see, those are only for the organization, but there were several times where I was afforded some opportunities, and this lady wanted to show me where she lived in Mumbai, and outside her door is arguably the largest dump in the world, of which I climbed up, and as far as you could see, and the only thing on the other side of it is the airport. It's just some very, very difficult situations there. And this is very typical of the areas where these folks live. And yet in the midst of all of that turmoil, I saw this beautiful door with this beautiful young lady sitting there, and allowed me to photograph her, and I just thought that was just a nice warm photograph. Here's a similar situation though, and what I like about this is how she's holding on the mom. We have the foot coming down, the finger pointing right here at her head, just a nice frame, and the light just hitting her just nicely. Allow me to take you to Haiti, and this organization is an organization called ITOT, and what they do is their goal and objective is to bring awareness to handicapped children in third world countries. And a big part of what they do is try to raise money for wheelchairs and so forth, for children that have these bad handicaps. And I don't typically show the faces of people unless the moms or parents say, take this back to the United States, show the people. And in the cases that you see here, those are all people that gave me permission and said, please let people be aware of our problems here. And you can just see this poor child here, very malnutrition, had both physical and mental problems. The irony of it is, and this is a classroom in Haiti, and this is very typical of what the classroom looks like. This is one of the fortunate young women, ladies that had a wheelchair, but the irony of it is nothing's handicap accessible. So in order to move these people, they need to be lifted up in and out of every facility they go to. So all kinds of struggles over there that they're dealing with yet. So there's some challenges ahead of that. And this happened to be one of the orphanages we were at, just a cute young lady. So, as part of the philanthropic stuff that I do internationally, I get to travel through these other locations. This image and the next one I share with you were taken in 2003, my first digital images. I brought them back in about a year ago just to see if I could clean them up a little bit, and it was fun to know that these are 3-pixel images back in the day, and at the time that was state-of-the-art technology. But anyway, that's obviously Florence, Italy there. I'm going to take you to Auschwitz, and this is a very sad place. Of course, it's in color. I photographed it in color, but my eyes only saw it in black and white. And this is a place that I think every human being in the world should see at some point in their life. The day I was there, it was cold, it was rainy, and you'll notice a lack of people, which was an absolutely amazing opportunity because there were no people or very limited, and I'm able to get images of Auschwitz without the normal crowds that are associated with it. And again, this was very impactful to me, and your mind wanders when you're in a place like this. And the imagery I'm trying to show is I wanted to get things like barbed wire as part of the image, and again, my foreground leading you into maybe the midground. And I couldn't help but think, being inside there, the people looking out the windows and the fear in there, and the picture of the lock on the exterior as opposed to the interior was very impactful to me, and I don't need to tell you the meaning of that, and that's, again, why I photographed that. And again, I purposely wanted a grainy shot. It was cold, dark, and dreary, and again, I just thought that was appropriate for this, and I kind of titled this the end of the road here, and just a very, very challenging place. And again, I believe every human being should see this at one point in their life. So allow me to take you from what is one of the saddest places in the world to maybe one of the happiest places. And we talked briefly about Bhutan. They don't measure their success by gross domestic product. They have a happiness factor, and that's how they determine if they're successful. And that's one of the things that's nice about Bhutan, is they look at life that way. This is a sunrise on the top of a mountain where all of this you see here is fog that is burning off rapidly. This was a 30-second opportunity, and at the end of those 30 seconds, every bit of fog was gone, and we had harsh light, and it disappeared. So again, as I mentioned earlier about don't hesitate. You see the opportunity, take it at that moment. I have this hanging in my living room. I like this picture so much. Colors in Bhutan are just phenomenal. And this is the tiger's nest. You've probably seen many photographs of this. It was a painful hike, but very worthwhile to get up there. And when I'm photographing, I'm always looking at frames. You mentioned memory. I recall that part of the things I do is frames, and I could have went outside that and photographed it straight on. But again, for me, what helps give impact to the image is the fact that I stepped back into something that added a little more dynamic to the image. Same thing here. These are two roof lines that you see here, and when I first showed this image to my wife, she goes, "Why didn't you just go outside and you could have got the whole building?" I was like, "Honey, you missed the whole point." I worked hard to get inside in order to get the shot. But again, different strokes, different folks. Some people would prefer it the other way, and again, this just happened to be what I enjoyed. This was a sunrise shot with lots of clouds and this beautiful fog just streaking down the mountainside. Again, one of those opportunities where it just didn't last long. We talked about that decisive moment. I saw this monk walking by. I saw that open spot here, and I thought, I've got a half a second to nail it. I want to see if I could do it. I got myself pre-focused, all set. Saw him walking by, and you can see he's taking a step. The minute he was in there, bam, I was able to nail it. So it's one of those things where, again, talk about decisive moment. The image would not have worked had he been anywhere else in that frame. And again, we're at many points very high in the elevation. This is a bridge where the flags were blowing in the wind. This monk just went over that step and started walking through. And again, it's just one of those things that was very appealing. And I wanted to get the perimeter of this. It's like its own frame that it has. And one of the things I do when I'm in an area like that is I try to be very friendly with the people. And that has paid dividends for me many times, because at some point while we were outside of this house listening to the prayers and the chants, somebody came out and said, "Would you like to come in?" It's like, yes, that was so nice. And again, they allowed us in there. They allowed us to photograph. There was just a couple of us during the ceremony. They knew why we were there, and they were very cordial and very polite about it. And it was just a really nice experience. This is another example where we were listening, we heard this is in somebody's house, and we heard that, and this woman came up to us and said, you know, we see you guys listening here, would you like to go in? And again, it's like, well, let me think about that for a nanosecond, and by all means. So in order to get this shot, it was challenging because I had that harsh light on the outside. There is not a second floor, so I had to reach my camera as high as I possibly could, face it down, in order to get the components of what's in the image in the image. So we talked about Iceland. Amazing place. It's one of those where, again, if the opportunity presents itself, you got to see it. Constantly changing. Every day, shorelines change and everything. And it's maybe a little hard to see with the projector here, but there's all these colors in this sunrise here, and this fog and this mist. I got up, you know, before the sun came up to shoot this, and it was just amazing. I actually went out to shoot the ponies that were roaming wild in that area, and I saw this and took that. Here's, you know, again, the colors there, you know, are just phenomenal. And what caught my eye here is how this cloud leads you into this sphere here, a spire. And if you look closely, you'll see a couple of the friends that I was with when we went out there to shoot that. And in these bay areas, the still water, the reflections, again, I mentioned I love shooting reflections. This is just one that just worked nicely for me. And again, the next day, that would look totally different. So that's the beauty of it, is the landscape changes constantly. And so every day there's a new opportunity to photograph there. And here's the pony, and I was hoping I could get some shots, and after a while, it got to the point where it was getting ridiculous because this thing was becoming annoying. It kept nudging me, wanting me to feed him something, and I was worried whether I was going to be able to get close to any of them. After a while, I couldn't get rid of them. And again, what I did here is purposely wanted to get these guys in the background here and have a separation there where that mountain is. And again, these are just some of the ice formations that you see there. So I mentioned earlier about India. I've been traveling to India now for about 10 years, and that's obviously the border of Pakistan and India where I'm there. And I show some of those pictures to my wife. She thinks I'm crazy, but in any event, to me, one of the most amazing places in the world to photograph is India. There is such a contrast of some muted colors to amazing colors, you know, brights and lows and all these different contrasts. And if the opportunity ever presents itself, I strongly encourage it. This is in the northern area, the Leh and Ladakh area, and this is part of the Himalayas here. But again, I told you earlier about layers. Again, I have foreground, more foreground, midground, background, all these layers, which is something that the human eye loves to see. So when you're out and about and you have those opportunities, look for things like that. And again, I show this picture that people say, where is that, Tibet or Bhutan or wherever, and again, this is northern India. So again, the intent here is I wanted to capture this with these guys and their horns and the mountains in the background here. Of course, you've got to have a picture. That's the cobra that escaped down in Florida. No. This is in Varanasi. This is where people go to die. There are cremations here 24 hours a day. It's an amazing sight to see. Me and another fellow paid this young guy to take us out in his little boat. We got in a boat, and there's 12, 18 inches of water in the boat, and we're thinking, what are we doing? You know, here we are. There's, of course, no life jackets or anything like that. But anyway, we were able to capture some pretty stunning imagery from the Ganges River looking into the facility here. And again, these are some of the steps along the way of the Ganges, and just the patterns and the people with it just make for some nice imagery. And we love the color red, so if you see red, that's an opportunity to shoot. And this fellow was laying there comfortably, didn't mind the fact that I took a whole bunch of his pictures. And again, the steps here, and again, what appeals to me here is how you come down here and you just see this flow of the material that goes down the steps with the image. This is in Kashmir. This is about as far north as you're going to get up there. Everything is done on the water. Commerce is on the water. They live on the water. They grow all of their produce on the water. It's an amazing sight to see. Lots of political turmoil there now, and so tourism used to be a very popular place in the for centuries actually, and it just doesn't see the tourism that it does now because of some of the turmoil. But in my mind, one of the prettiest places on earth. This is on the same water, and I pause here because the other thing the human eye likes to see is triangles. Can you see any triangles in this picture? all over the place. And I sat down at one time and I started to count, and there were just too many of them. But it's interesting how the human eye likes that, and in this particular image, of course, not staged, they're all over the place if you take the time to look at them. But the other thing, of course, is the benefit here is look at the expression on this guy's face. He's obviously trying to make a point about something. And I like getting up close and taking the people's pictures. And again, this is in Kashmir, and people would argue with me that these folks are not from India, but because of the trade routes in the north, that it's got a real melting pot of all types of cultures that are in this particular area. And another favorite image of mine, just looking at this young fella pondering whatever's out there. I love the texture in the door. The towel makes this thing here. We have this nice frame here, but if you look real closely, you can see his brother peeking around the corner over here. And the reason it looks muted around that is there's smoke all the time, so that creates some challenges, but it also creates some interesting dynamics with it. And the feathering you see around the perimeter, I was shooting through a bunch of leaves in order to get that shot. This was a long telephoto, and that's why it has that muting effect around the perimeter. This is in Chennai in South India, and I purposely wanted to get a slow shutter speed so you can get a sense and a feel of the waves and the movement, but families gather here in the evening on a Friday night. It's their tradition to do that. This happened to be one of the dancers who was kind of at the pose, just a beautiful young lady. And this is interesting because this is one of the pyramids in the south, and the clouds and the color of them around it is not photoshopped. That is a dynamic that I've never seen before. And for a very brief moment, the sunlight broke through. And again, one of those things where it was maybe a 30, 60-second opportunity where the temple was lit, and I was able to capture it with that bizarre cloud behind it. And this was walking into a village. This young fellow was waking up from a nap in what looked like some kind of hammock, and the pretty red to it. We probably startled him as we were walking by. He peeked his head up and allowed me to get the shot. We went into the village, and on our way back out, we see him again here with Mom being fed, and look at how the light's hitting his eye. Look at the look on her face looking at him. And again, what's interesting is these are very poor people, but yet part of their culture is to wear these beautifully colorful clothing, and that's what I meant about the contrast, and I just think that it's just amazing to see that. And again, just a group that's doing some wash. This is one of the images that outdoor photographer used in that magazine article I was telling you about. This is in South India. This is an area called Amritsar. This is where the Golden Temple is. You need to arrive there about 3 o'clock in the morning in order to kind of see the festivities that take place. And it's just a beautiful picture. This thing is brilliant gold that's lit up, of course, during the evening. This is 3:30-ish, thereabouts. And of course, I wanted this fellow on the right to be part of the foreground with his spear. And this next image, I stepped further back and wanted to get one of the arches. And here's a father with his son, obviously communicating to him about whatever the rituals are here. And the unfortunate thing is you can get in here, but you're not allowed to take pictures there unless you happen to have a small camera that accidentally goes off while you're inside, and then you just move on from there. So obviously part of the portability aspect, in order to get some of this type of images, that was a piece of it that was important. And here it is outside of that facility. Just a spectacular place. And this is the start of what you may or may not have heard of, something called the Kumbh Mela. This is an event that takes place once every 12 years in India in an area called Allahabad. It is the largest gathering of human mass in the world. And the day we were there is what they call the most auspicious day. 30+ million people in a size of an area of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which is where I'm from. And it's chaos beyond belief, but it's organized chaos. To think that 30 million people are in this extremely small area, and it only happens for about 1 month out of a 12-year time frame, and an opportunity that I'll probably never have a chance to see it again. Well, I shouldn't say never. But during the day, there are communities where these tribes from different parts of India and the world, for that matter, set up their camp. And this is where I would go in and photograph these people. And again, the success for me with people is that I try to extend a handshake or a smile or whatever so they know I'm not a threat. And after a while, I try to become invisible there, and they just let me shoot. And these are some of the images that I was able to capture. And this is a big part of how I like to photograph. This is a wide-angle lens. I'm extremely close to this gentleman. I wanted this fella in the background to be blurred and have you know that something's there, but again, this is my focal point right up here. Exact same thing here. Again, I wanted to have him, of course, be tack sharp, and then just these folks in the background just be a bit of a blur. But again, you're not going to do that with a telephoto, and you're not going to do that without engaging your subject matter, and that is key in order to capture imagery like this. And this was actually, I shot this from a bridge of what would be about a 500 millimeter equivalent, looking straight down to this young fellow just laying there with those spices. One of the benefits in shooting sunsets and sunrises in India is there is pollution, which creates some beautiful sunrises and sunsets. So that's one of the benefits. So just this past year, I was over there during what they call Holi, H-O-L-I. And this is, today we have these races where people throw paint. This is where it originated. And it's one of those where they during the ceremony, it just paint everywhere. And as a tall white American guy, I was a huge target. And there are pictures of me I should share with you at the end of the day where I just was totally doused. This was just the start, and you can give you an idea what I started to look like just at the very beginning of this. And it's just an amazing experience. Part of the ritual then is what they do, and it's interesting. The women have these 12, 15-foot sticks, and the men carry a shield, and the women are allowed to plummet them. And I don't understand the whole process. It looks very dangerous, and of course you wouldn't want them to miss, but that's what you're seeing here. And you can see this person here protecting themselves. They garnish the shields a lot, and of course they get plummeted after a while. But I wanted to, how can I show you that image and give you a sense of the motion? So what I did in this next image is I slowed the shutter speed down, gave it a slight zoom effect so you could start to get a sense of what was going on, because without a video, and I could have showed you a video, but I wanted to figure out a way to have a still image show you the motion that was taking place. And here's another attempt at me trying to do that. So, all the years that I've been traveling to India, I would get back and people would say, well, did you see the Taj Mahal? I have never seen the Taj Mahal until this last trip. This is in Agra, right outside of Gujarat, which is where I was at. So I thought, let's be a little strategic about it. So I did a little reconnaissance the day before. This is looking at it from the other side of the river, the back side of the Taj Mahal. So the next day my plan was I was going to get up early. I'm going to be the first person in line because that's how they have the process. And I was going to run as fast as I could to get in there to catch imagery without the tons of people. This is the postcard shot. I wanted to get this, but I wanted to find unique shots of the Taj that you typically don't see. But in this particular case, I wanted to get the postcard shot. I found some flowers purposely in the front of that thing because I wanted it in there. And then I ran as fast as I could, and the next series of images are shots of the Taj that, to the best of my knowledge, you don't typically see. And in several cases, there's one person in the picture here. You can see it there. It'll give you an idea of the scale. So I actually thought that worked well. And here's just, of course, with the reflection, looking out the door. And again, you'll notice there's one person right up there. And then I moved a little bit towards the rear, or to the side, I should say. And I saw these beautiful tile patterns in the floor, which create a leading line into the Taj Mahal, of which I was very happy how it turned out. I couldn't control the sky, but Mother Nature was with me on this one, and just this beautiful sky to work with. And so I went to the other side, got a little closer, got a little wider angle lens, and again, you see the sunbeams coming over the roof of the Taj. Again, it's one of those things where you can't, predict that, but I was very fortunate to catch it. And again, if you look here, you see there's a person right up there. So we bid adieu to India. Allow me to take you to Atacama. Does anybody know what the Atacama is?
A desert in Chile.
It is the largest arid desert in the world. It spans 3 countries, Chile, Argentina, and Peru. And the portion that I was at was in Argentina, in an area that is very, very remote. It took us 2 days of overland vehicles to get there, and it is one of the most amazing places I have ever seen. It goes below freezing at night, and it goes up into the 90s during the day, so it's extreme temperature shifts. But again, nothing man-made for hundreds and hundreds of miles, and nothing lives there either, so that's part of the reason why that. But it's one of the most beautiful landscapes I have ever seen in my life, and as I said, if the opportunity ever presents itself, you got to see it. There are these sculptures, as I call them, all over the place that are just beautiful beyond belief. And again, what's fun is because the sand that you see here, every day it changes. So it's one of those things where the tapestry is constantly moving with Mother Nature's influence. And again, this would happen to be towards sunset. And again, those waves would not be there the next day, or at least in some different format. And to me, if somebody would say, what would it be like to be on Mars or the moon? This is probably the closest thing that I could equate to. And if I didn't tell you what I was photographing, at first glance, this looks like a huge body of water with the waves and everything leading up to it, but that is all very arid sand. Now, if I were a skateboarder, I would think, now that would be pretty cool, because there's all these little dips and doos in there. But the thing that's tough about this is pumice, and we were warned ahead of time, you need to wear soles in your shoes. I think Vibram is what it's called, because this stuff will eat your shoe. It's glass particles. If you fall on that, you will tear your hand up. So it's interesting, as beautiful as it is, it's got a very, very harsh element to it. And again, these amazing patterns all throughout that. And this happened to be just one of the mountains, and to me it almost looks like a wasp over here. So the question was, what is that? And the response we got back is, it rains in the Atacama Desert once every 100 years. Suspicion is that's probably a rainfall from whatever one of those 100-year storms are that created those beautiful striations in the side of that mountain. And again, first glance, you see that beautiful water before the mountains, and of course there's no water there. That is all sand. And again, as I mentioned earlier about the layers, I'm always looking for layers in the imagery. And if there's an opportunity to shoot stars, I'm going to do that in a place like this. 0 air pollution, 0 light pollution, and because it's so dry, humidity is not even a factor. So the opportunity to shoot stars here is just phenomenal. When I took this shot, you see this bright star here, I wanted to kind of line that up and line this guy with this star up here, just to give it a little bit of symmetry. And here's the Milky Way. And the question that begs to be asked is, what's that light source, though? And what we did is we had a walkie-talkie with a guy on the truck. We said, hit your high beams just for a second so we could get a little depth onto that mountain that was there. And it was amazing how it turned out. So anyway, just being a little creative with it. So that's the only part that's not man-made, that is man-made there. So, Cuba. I had the opportunity to be there in December, the day President Obama made the announcement that we were opening up diplomatic relations. What a wonderful time to be in Cuba. People would come up to me in the streets at night and they'd say, where are you from? I'd say, United States, and they would hug and say, we're going to be friends again. It was an amazing experience to be there. I mean, Cuba is amazing in and of itself, but to be there during the time in which we had those announcements made was just an amazing benefit to this. And this guy almost looked like a young Fidel to me, so I had to get him in the picture here. It's just an amazing place. And I want to point out, if you would make note of this roof here, this is Hotel Telegrafo. This is where most tourists that come to Havana will stay. And it'll be obvious why I mentioned that's in a minute. So we photographed from that roof, and this happened to be the next morning, this beautiful sunrise. I wanted to get the sun peeking through the little crack in that building there. And then here is where I took that image before. I was staying on the roof over here. And if there is a Bureau of Tourism in Cuba, this would be the image that they want us to see as far as depicting Havana. But remember that roof I was telling you about? I turned 180 degrees and this is what I captured. To me, this is Havana, this is Cuba, this is what I love. I love the colors, love the textures, and to me it was just amazing to see that, even though that might not be how they want it represented. To me, that is what Havana and Cuba is all about. Just amazing textures, just beautiful. And then I love getting out on the street, just doing some street photography. These images I've desaturated a little bit for a very specific reason, because I wanted to emulate that kind of sense and feel. This is some of the stuff I took at night, just again purposely putting this in the foreground. And lucky enough to catch a dove overlooking the whole city. And in the evening, the beautiful lighting that lights up these old buildings. And what's fun about this is nothing has been built new since the 1950s. So it is like going back in a time machine. And I know that's going to change probably soon. So I'm so blessed to have gotten the opportunity to photograph there. This is the Malecon, the famous Malecon, beautiful area. Remember this lighthouse for a reason, and I'll come back to that in just a little bit. So I wanted to capture some people shots, and this guy with his computer. That's a joke, but that's the extent of the communications, the way most of them do. And I purposely tried to get in the frame, the flag, him, all of that with the mirror in the image, and of course, the imagery on the top there also. Boxing is a huge thing in Cuba, and I did a whole series just on boxing that was there, and it was again a great experience. These folks were very cooperative in allowing me to photograph them during the course of the day, and some great portrait opportunities. And this is part of the street photography that I was doing, walking up down the street, and a lot of times, I mentioned before about trying to find a frame. Here I've got two people that are creating the frame for me. The light is hitting this gentleman just right as he's working on a sewing machine, and of course the benefit is all of the magazine pinups that he has in the background. It's one of those things where you can't stage that, but train your eye to look for things and opportunities like that. Bob Marley was there? No, it's not Bob Marley. Music is another big thing in Cuba, and musicians are all over the place. A couple construction workers taking a break, as is this gentleman waiting for something. Now, I could have framed this and cut off this big old fan here, but to me, the fan helps make the image. And cigars. Cuba and cigars. So again, I did a whole bunch of shots where my focus was on the tip of the cigar, and in some cases, the person smoking the cigar. You can't go to Cuba without photographing something with cigars. And this is a shot that I enjoy because, again, it took me a while to get it. I wanted the flag in here, of course. Talked about juxtaposition just a little bit, but I also wanted separation. If you look carefully, I tried very, very hard to get separation between each one of the persons in the picture, just so it wouldn't overlap, and again, hopefully create a little bit more of a dynamic shot. Again, so this was not just one shot in and out. I had to work this in order to get to that point. And when people say, what image would you say depicts Cuba/Havana? And this is the image that I would pick. And the reason being is we've got a vintage vehicle, we've got people-powered vehicles, we have horse-powered vehicles, we have these crazy, telephone lines, electrical lines. To me, this helps tell what Havana/Cuba is about. And of course, like cigars, you have to photograph the cars that are there. And again, the fun part is doing some panning with the images. Excuse me. And my favorite pan, it looks this elderly woman holding what probably is a toy for their grandchild, and again, just zooming across. But if you look closely at the look on her face and his face, that's what makes this image fun. And art is a huge thing in Cuba. And this, I looked at this several times, and the reason the image works the way it does now is because of where I positioned myself. If I would have moved slightly to the left or slightly to the right, it wouldn't work. So you got to look at this for a minute to figure out what's actually going on there and how that's connected. As I said, though, had I moved 1 foot to the left or 1 foot to the right, the image would not have worked. So you can ponder that. And crazy Art Deco. In some cases, it almost, I didn't think I was in Cuba. It was just such this amazing arts community that's there. And this was in Trinidad of Cuba, beautiful arts community. And the one thing, even though things have changed with their government structure, is the one thing that has continued to run since 1939 is the Tropicana. And of course, you have to take advantage of that, so we were fortunate to be able to get a couple seats down front and just get a couple shots of the Tropicana. So again, that's one of those where if it works, you have to see that. So I mentioned, remember that lighthouse I pointed out? So the day we were leaving, or the day before we were leaving, I was up in that lighthouse and presented with this beautiful gift, and it was just so nice. I shot this with a wide-angle lens, how the sky was just smiling at me when I took this image. So just a fun image, and it was nice that that would be a parting shot. So 2 weeks ago, this is where I was, and it's one of those places where I ask people, you know, have you ever been to Mongolia? And I've yet to find anybody say yes to that. But what an amazing photographic opportunity. It is a landscape that I've not seen anywhere else in the world. The environment here, where we were in Western Mongolia, where Russia, China, and Kazakhstan all kind of come together. Siberia is just north of us here. So the environment is harsh, a little harsher than I anticipated. We went down in the 20s at night, and we were in tents/gurs, sleeping in them, and it was a little bit chillier than I was planning on, but what an amazing landscape, and the people are just amazing. So this will give you a little bit of a taste and a feel for what it looks like. And throughout this whole region, there are nomads, and these people travel at every season, and they have to move every season because of their livestock. There's camels, there's sheep, goats, yaks, etc., and they have to move to where the environment's appropriate and the food is appropriate. So every 3 months, these families pick up and move, and this is their environment. But look at the layers and the colors of the layers in these mountains here. The closest I could come to anything like this might be in Atacama, but not with the color differential the way it shows up here. It was just one of those things where it was just absolutely gorgeous. And this happened to be, if you look in this little corner here, there's a gur that a family was staying in. And this is at sunrise. Excuse me, this was sunset. And it's hard to see on the screen here, but every color of the rainbow is in the sky here, and with the way the sun's just kissing the top of the peaks here, it was just brilliant. There happened to be a herd of camels by this one lake that we were at, so it's not totally arid like it is Atacama. There is water in spots. But then the image that I really enjoyed is, of course, the fella herding the camels up as they were departing. And again, just, the sun was right, the imagery was right. These two young kids sitting with a herding dog with the goats in the background, just a fun image. So I haven't had a chance to get through most of my images yet, so these are just a few pieces from it. This gives you an idea of what the skies and how dynamic it can look. This is our camp, just to put it in perspective. And I was coming down this ravine here and started to notice the sky was changing, and just beautiful clouds, dynamic clouds. So I hiked back, and then this lip of this mountain here, I hiked up that mountain thinking that maybe there'll be a storm and maybe I could even catch some lightning, and here it is just a few minutes later with, again, because of the live composite component on the camera, I'm able to hold the camera open in an open position for what amounted to probably about 4 or 5 minutes, and sure enough, I got that streak just at the right time. And a couple of my camping partners from down below looked up at me and said, we had our camera focused on you because we figured you were the next thing that was going to light up. So as that storm got closer, I hightailed it off the top of that mountain. This is actually the next morning, hiking a little bit different location, but high enough where I could still capture the peaks. the golden color from the sun just as it was coming over the top, and of course the snow-capped mountains here is what appealed to me. This ravine here is this next image I'm going to show you. We hiked up in here because there was a waterfall they said was worthwhile, but I actually found the creek bed to be a little more impressive, and I just took a series of images of where these mini falls took place. And again, this is actually a 64 megapixel image. Again, shot this with the OMD M5 Mark II, which allows that ability. So I can zoom in on detail on this thing here that is just phenomenal. And to think that it comes out of these little cameras here just blows my mind how they do it. I have no idea, but again, for a shot like this, I was very grateful to have that. And here we are at night. Again, you're starting to tell I like to shoot the stars and the Milky Way, and this was one of the tents that had in the foreground, but the stars in the Milky Way like I have never seen anywhere else. Again, the same thing as Atacama, no light pollution, no air pollution, very, very little humidity. But the stars here, I have to say, I think were even more brilliant than what I saw in Atacama. It was just spectacular. So again, since I'm shooting the stars here, I have to, of course, do some star trails. This is about midnight. This is my home for 2 days. I'm actually in here while this is being photographed. And because it's such a long exposure, I could come in and out, check the camera every once in a while. So all total, this is an hour and 10-minute exposure. And of course, I had to locate the North Star in order to get me a center point here, and I purposely put that in my immediate foreground in order to accomplish this. So one image out of the camera, which again is pretty amazing that it has the ability to do that. And my only concern was falling asleep and waking up and having the camera still chugging while I was waking up. Here's a few more images of some of the religious artifacts in the country. And I share this with you because this is the deassembling of a gur. Again, that's what we stayed in the time we were there, and they have it down to a science where they can disassemble it in a half an hour and assemble it in 45 minutes. It's just amazing to think that they can do that. And again, these are part of the nomads, and in a couple of days they were in a completely different part of the country. This is what the interior looks like. They just, they're beautifully adorned, and as they get a guest, they bring out all kinds of food, cheeses, and things like that they are homemade there. That's really a delight to see. So the other thing that was on my list while I was in Mongolia, they have this thing called eagle hunters. You probably have heard of that. It is a dying breed. The old people have trained eagles to hunt for them. And the reason this is significant now is the younger people are not interested in wanting to follow in those traditions. So I wanted to capture this before that tradition disappeared. But the way it was explained to me is they take the eagles when they're just hatched and they train them, and the eagles know that that's who they stay with, and that's why they don't fly away. But I found what was interesting though is that are they trained to hunt for food, or what is it? And they hunt foxes. And so a lot of the garb that they wear are fox lined because of the eagles hunting them. The eagles are allowed to have the main part of the catch, and of course the eagle hunters then retain the pelt. And so we asked this gentleman if he wouldn't mind. We had harsh light, just sit inside the gur just a little bit where the light was hitting them, and just made for an absolutely gorgeous portrait with him and his eagle. And this gentleman, they told us, is 99 years old, an eagle hunter, and his kids said that the kids told him he's no longer, the way he, through an interpreter, said he's no longer allowed to hunt. And these are medals that he achieved over the years through, I guess, the military service within Mongolia. He was very proud of that and wanted to bring that out and share that with us. But again, the key here is the light on him and the face, and you can see how we're getting some nice illumination right on his eyes, which is a very important part, of course, the portrait. And here's another gentleman in a different part. And the significance here is if you look closely at the eagle, he looks like he's looking at me and he's saying, listen, buddy, you get a little closer, I'm taking your head off, and I wasn't about to do that. But the image that I really like the most of the eagle hunters is this one here where he lifted it up and the eagle spread its wings, and it had this lovely background to work with and a beautiful sky in the process. And as I say, this was just about 2 weeks ago. Actually, yeah, I guess it was right about 2 weeks ago that I took this image. So I wanted to share a few of these with you. And with that being said, I want to share with you some helpful hints from me that as I matured in my photography, I always advocate find someone or a group to shoot with, educate yourself, read books, watch tutorials. I constantly look at all this stuff all the time, look at other people's work, which is a great, important influence, network, volunteer, and through nonprofits, churches, etc. And I always advocate pushing yourself. And in my TED Talk, I concluded by saying, take steps along the way to maintain your passion, and as life circumstances permit, follow your goals, goals that come from your core, allow you to express your inner self more fully and be more satisfied. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, follow your dreams. Thank you very much.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.